We're still here now talking infrastructural development with a score of 48.33 out of 100 total points. Nigeria has over 50% infrastructure deficit. Also, Nigeria was ranked 24th out of 54 African countries in the Africa Infrastructure Development Index for 2020. The country's infrastructure deficit amounts to about 30% of its gross domestic product and falls short of the international benchmark of 70% set by the World Bank. How can we cover this deficit? We know we've been told that with Nigeria's population growing at a rate of over 2.5% every year, expected population to hit 400 million in 2050, that the country might need to invest at least about $3 trillion to reduce that infrastructural deficit. Who will bring this $3 trillion? Well, perhaps it will come from the private sector. That's what Mr. Emmanuel Odemayowa is here, the managing director of Kavli Group, joins us to see how we can get this $3 trillion naira. Mr. Odemayowa, thank you so much for your time this morning. We're looking for $3 trillion naira, $3 trillion, not naira.
Yes. Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me. Yeah, of course, when it comes to infrastructure development in Nigeria, and of course globally, I think the word is collaboration. Basically, the government, both at the federal and the state levels, are actually responsible for developing infrastructure. But if you look at the way it has gone in the recent times, you discover that it is not something that the government can do alone, whether at the federal level or even at the state level. So the $3 trillion you mentioned, majority of it will have to come from the private sector. There are a lot of projects right now that are being done in terms of PPPs by the federal government and state governments, even at the local government levels. We have some of them that already have PPPs in place. I mean, that's the public-private partnerships. You know, they are doing it and it's running very well. But majorly, I think for us in Nigeria, what we have to look at is about creating a blueprint.
Don't we have one? We do have some policies. At least we know there's the credit tax, the infrastructure credit tax. There's also, I think there are about 2 others. We have Dangote really active on one of those. I think that's a tax credit, you know, where we see some of the roads that he's done.
Yeah.
So we do have some of these policies, but maybe must a company be as big as Dangote to be able to jump on those platforms?
No, I don't think so. Of course, like we said, $3 trillion is not a small amount of money. So basically, it's not just going to be about one company, whether it's big or whether it's small. It's going to be about a combination of many companies. So basically, for private sectors to come to the infrastructure development space, the federal government has to do a lot of things. Number one is creating the environment. You understand? But majorly, again, is about the government being able to identify very bankable projects.
Like?
You understand? So, okay, for instance, you mentioned road. I remember the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway some time ago was concessioned, to a private sector player. So for a project like that, they were meant to have, toll gates. You understand? So, because basically, when any player in the private sector is coming to infrastructure development, they are coming with the mindset that they're going to make returns. They're going to make profits. So, such projects will have to be bankable.
But have we explored that tax credits policy? Because, I mean, when you talk of tax, especially at this time in the country, the government is very serious about taxes, looking for how to expand the net and all of that. And then we have, according to the finance bill, an entrepreneur would use an average of about 30–40% of its profit for taxes. So if you give a holiday to a company or a business, in exchange for that, I think a lot of businesses will jump on that. But it seems we have not gotten a lot of participants on that platform.
You said earlier that, of course, we already have some policies in place. And I mentioned blueprint. You said we have blueprints in place. But what we are talking about is, of course, the one you made reference to, the one Dangote Group is doing, that is Apapa-Oshodi Expressway. It's a very good example in terms of collaboration between the public and the private sector players. So, but what we are talking about is that let's have a blueprint in place. Now, Dangote is a massive company. There are other companies within the infrastructure space, that can come into it and also do what Dangote is doing. Yeah, they are
But
very,
why are they not
very
coming
big.
on? Why does it seem they're not coming on?
And that is why I keep...
Maybe the conditions are too stringent or something. I mean, you are in the private sector. Why is there any project you're working on?
Yeah, so for us at Cavalry Group, we try to see how we can encourage private sector players to come into infrastructure development.
How many do you have now?
Yeah, okay, for us right now, we are doing projects. Majorly, we are looking at sustainable infrastructure development. Because right now, even at the level of United Nations, that is the major focus they are looking at.
Yeah,
so we have projects within the Cavalry Group. Apart from our real estate projects, we have...
I mean, we're looking at our infrastructure.
Yeah.
If you do real estate, for instance, you're doing it as a business, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about infrastructure, national infrastructure that will affect the GDP of the country at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So why don't you have a lot of the private sector participating on this policy or in this policy?
Yeah, it's about the attraction. You understand? It has to be very attractive. I mentioned earlier that private sector players, they are looking for returns. They are looking for profit. We have projects. We are going into power. You understand? We are going to energy. Right now the sector has been deregulated. So some players are coming to the power generation, space.
So what would make it attractive to you, for instance, since states have now been allowed to delve into that? Yeah. What would make it attractive to you to work with Lagos State's government to provide power?
Yeah, so I think for us, major area is the area of tax holiday. You understand? That you mentioned before, tax holiday, tax credits, that you mentioned before. We want to get such assurances, like the power project that we are working on right now at the Bejuleki axis of Lagos. So we have been discussing with the state government. We are trying to see...
Are you getting the attention of the state government?
Yeah, no, we are getting their attention. I have to let you know, actually, that both at the federal and the state levels, they are actually very eager to do business with the private sector. But basically, there's still that angle of the blueprint, a particular blueprint that if you and I come into that industry right now, we can say, oh, okay, so are the things that we need to follow. These are the processes that we need to follow. Once we do this, we know that we get these things right. So we still don't have...
So we don't have that blueprint.
We don't have the blueprint.
How do we solve that problem?
Thank you very much. So at Cavalry Group, in 2017, we put together a National Infrastructure Summit, in Lagos, and it was well attended. Even at the level of IMF, we had representations and all that. In early 2024, we are putting together another National Infrastructure Summit. And we are doing it in Abuja this time around.
Yeah, but I guess it goes beyond the summit, because what comes after the summit? Where is the blueprint? Who are those who were supposed to, take the implementation of these blueprints to the next level? Who's talking to the government? Who was putting it together? How do we get it out there to become a public document? I guess those are the...
It shouldn't just happen overnight. You understand? As we realize, within the private sector, we have been coming together. You understand? We have different chambers of commerces and all that. They're also talking about developing infrastructure. So there are a lot of breakfast meetings, a lot of sessions, that are always held, and this all gets towards how we can talk about creating a blueprint, that we directly attract players in the private sector to come, players in the private sector to come into infrastructure development.
So I guess as the media now, our job now should be, how do we push for that blueprint? Because, it becomes a waste if we're having meetings and we have great ideas and we discuss great ideas and we have great policies like the tax credit. Every business, I believe, would want a tax holiday, but we don't see the participation. It means there's a missing link, So I guess as the media now, we'll try and pursue the government and get them to give us that blueprint to attract people like you to get involved in more infrastructure development. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Emmanuel Odemayowa. We hope to see your company and you involved in more PPP projects for national development, and then we'll be glad that you were here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me
this morning.